Hello everyone, and welcome to the second installation of the Cultura Anime blog. Thank you for joining me again. I'm Ariel. So, a couple weeks back, I got a little bit into watching the Ferguson, Missouri protests online that were sparked in reaction to the shooting of an unarmed teenager named Michael Brown. So the way that I was able to watch these protests, or how I felt kind of even participate in them to a very small extent, was through social media and the internet. There was a lot of reporters on the ground who were just walking around interviewing protesters and capturing things on film and streaming it live. I felt very strongly about this, and I couldn't be there, so I witnessed. And after I had watched for about 8 hours, and it was about 2 in the morning in Ferguson, Missouri, I saw as these on-the-ground media outlets that were just trying to capture and allow people to bear witness to everything were driven away. The police forced them to leave, and I just got chills because all of a sudden there's no witness to what's going on in these protests. So it's in this way that social media entirely limited my ability to fully witness what was going on there. Even though I was watching these kind of rogue media outlets, not the main ones, there was still so much that I couldn't see because I was not there. So while I would never say that I was a part of that protest because I was watching it online, there are a lot of people that consider that sort of interaction as being a part of the protest. Sort of like digital protesting, digital activism. Malcolm Gladwell writes for The New Yorker, and he discusses pretty in-depth the drawbacks to this so-called digital activism as opposed to on-the-ground activism. One of the things that stuck with me the most was this idea of social media increasing participation, not increasing motivation. So yes, I watched the protests, but it's kind of like big whoop because it was so easy for me to do it. My computer's just here, all I had to do was pull it up. I could do even other things while I was watching. It did not take all that much motivation whatsoever. But is me saying that I witnessed the Ferguson protests and some things that went on that night completely meaningless just because of how easy it was for me to do so? I don't personally think it's meaningless. I think that being a witness to these types of events is still important and still means something. Without social media, without the internet, I wouldn't have even been vaguely aware of what was going on in Ferguson. But I do agree, of course, that digital activism is not the same as on-the-ground activism. Primarily, digital activism is a whole lot safer. And I mean, isn't the point of activism kind of that it's dangerous? That you're really putting yourself out there and you're really risking something. There's an activist, Mario Savio, who was a huge part of the UC Berkeley protests in 1964. And there's a part of that speech that's always stuck with me because I think it perfectly explains the nature of protest and what you're trying to do. I'm going to read that part of the speech for you now. There is a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. The whole point of a protest, of activism, is to be there. When something's going wrong, you go in and you stop it yourself. You put your hands on it. You put your whole body on it. Of course, I think that social media has a place in protest. It naturally does, because social media permeates every aspect of our social life. It's really just everywhere. I can't even count the number of times that I've been talking to someone in the middle of a thought, in the middle of a conversation, which just gets interrupted because they received a text or decided that they needed to check Facebook or something. A lot of times I'm out at dinner with my parents and I'm sitting there looking at them and they're just both on their phones while we're at dinner. I personally think the use of technology is out of control at this point. When I leave my phone at home accidentally and I go out somewhere, I find myself constantly, probably every 30 seconds, going instinctively to check it and then remembering that I don't have it. And the reason I think this is a problem in the first place is because it totally takes you out of the moment. You're not even really where you are at any one time. You're in multiple places. And maybe that works for some people. Who am I to say? But for me, it takes me out of the moment, and I find myself less happy when I'm so immersed in the world of social media. Years ago, Frontline correspondent David Rushkoff envisioned this magical world of technology where everyone was going to be using it as a tool, and it was going to be significantly increasing everyone's life in a positive way. But in this day and age, right now, David Rushkoff himself even says that this is not the world he envisioned. Because technology is not used as a tool, it's just permeating all aspects of life. But the thing that gives me hope in all this is people like me and so many of my peers are taking notice of the fact that technology is being overused. I love when I'm sitting at a table and I take out my phone and I'm not even thinking about it, I'm on Twitter or something, and then all my other friends are on Twitter and one of our friends is not, and that friend goes like, "Hey guys, we're all here together, like, what are we doing?" And that's what gives me hope, that people in this generation do recognize that the technology is being overused. Now, in terms of how technology should be used in activism, I'm not entirely sure. I think, of course, it's going to be used as a tool just because, like I said, how often we encounter it. And I think it's also useful because with things like Twitter and Facebook, you can find out what's going on real time. And I think that that has really valuable uses in activism. But I have to agree with Malcolm Gladwell. Being an activist on the internet is not the same as being an activist on the ground. You can post videos about messed up things going on around the world as much as you want, and I think that's valuable to inform people. Informing people is the first step, and then you've got to get out there. Thank you for joining me, and see you again next Friday.